Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Good.
We're live here on LinkedIn, so say hello.
Hello, everybody.
So how are you doing?
Good. This is great and loving the show.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Good experience so far?
Yeah. Learning a lot.
Yeah.
Some great new concepts I never thought about before. It's great.
Nice. So tell us, so you have an interesting role, I think, right? So you're the Director of Supply Chain Planning and Analytics for the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority.
Yes.
Right? So that's very interesting, right? For this podcast, typically we have people on that are, working in the warehouse or worked around the warehousing, but for the Metro Transit Authority, obviously that's something that's very heavily involved in transportation and supply chain.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about your role there, because I'm very curious, like how does the supply chain analytics come into play when we're talking about something that's, essentially public transit, right?
Yeah. So it's a new role. I think I'm the only one in the United States. I don't think any other transit agency has
congratulations.
one.
We have a groundbreaker right here. Yes.
So we built our supply chain department right before the pandemic, so about 3 years ago. Prior to that, most of the public transit agencies focused solely on materials management, procurement. That's it.
Okay.
And so a consultant came through and was like, you really need a supply chain group.
Yeah.
So we took all the pieces from the different departments, the operational groups that were under bus and rail and maintenance operations, and we centralized them under one group. Yeah. So we have a warehousing logistics team that focuses solely on forward and reverse logistics and supplying the operation groups what they need. We have a contracting group.
I guess from that perspective, you guys, your warehousing logistics side is focused on like parts and vehicles.
We literally handle everything from paper towels to train parts.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
okay.
We handle everything in between. We have a full rail maintenance division that we support. We have a full bus maintenance division we support. We support all the facilities. So you think elevators, escalators, buildings. Yeah. We also have a full police force that we support.
Wow.
It's really we're
Robust,
into everything. Yeah.
Interesting. And so now when you look at the supply chain of all that, obviously there's the coordination of getting all those materials and supplies, but then on the full aspect of understanding the fleet that's out there. How do you guys track that, and how do you utilize analytics to be able to make things more efficient and understand what's going on?
Yeah, and so that's what we started. We were sort of thrown into the deep end of the pool, so to speak, at the pandemic, and we were able to show that there is a need for this kind of analytics in the supply chain world within the maintenance groups. Yeah. We were able to forecast out just basic PPE needs and things like that, and now we're moving into reliability data and looking at quality of parts and are we getting the right bang for the buck? Are we claiming warranties we're supposed to be? How long are these parts lasting and things like that? So we're getting into the deep dive of the fleet makeups as well, and we're actually starting to get into the design phase of some of the assets to make sure they're putting the right parts on the assets.
Very interesting, and I think it's really interesting to see how supply chain is becoming everywhere. Like it's becoming so very important, right? Like you said, this is a very kind of new thing for Washington Metropolitan area, and it's really interesting to see like how that's coming into play there. So as you're looking at this, and you come to a show like this, obviously there's a lot of technology around. So what types of technologies are you looking at? What types of technologies make sense for your supply chain?
So we're looking at supply chain execution systems for warehouse management.
Okay.
So we can optimize our space and our spend in the warehouse. But we're also looking at forecasting and demand data tools that we can bring into the system. The challenge we have here that a lot of the private sectors don't have is we have public procurement policies and rules we have to follow.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so it makes it a little bit of a challenge. I can't just say, I really like that tool, I want to use that one. Yeah. We have to go through a whole process and it's competitively bid. So we have a little bit bigger challenge in that aspect. But there's a lot of good tools here that I've seen so far that we're going to take back and take a look at and evaluate.
Interesting. Yeah. I think it's very interesting. Like you think about, like you said, the private sector, which for the majority of us, I think in supply chain are like in the private sector, right? And so it's easy, like you said, to go out and say like, oh, I like this solution. Let's explore it, right?
Right.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about like that process, I guess, on the public side, government side. Like, how does that work? And we have a lot of solution providers that watch the show too. Like for them, like if they want to try and get into public sector or whatever, what's the way to do that?
Yeah, it's a long process. That's the key, number one. It's not something that's going to happen in a month or
patience,
in 90 days.
Patience.
It's going to be a long process. And a lot of it depends on the funding. So for example, if you're using federal money to buy this product, there are certain rules you have to follow. It has to be competitively bid. I can't write a specification that gears towards one particular tool or another. It has to be sort of generic so that multiple people can bid on it. You may have to make sure that the product's only made within the United States, depending on the funding and things like that. So it just depends on the color of the money and the project you're working on. And then with the IT related, you also have the cybersecurity aspect that you have to take into account as well. So there's a lot of different factors that play into a public procurement, and that's why it generally takes so long for the evaluation and the background checks and things like that.
Very interesting. And I'm curious on the transportation side as well. I mean, you guys are dealing with a lot of vehicles, right, primarily. So, how do you, and I guess like how is the team take into consideration as, especially with the pandemic you mentioned in there, I've seen obviously a spike in like deliveries and e-commerce, and that's adding to traffic congestion. How do you guys kind of now navigate that and work around increased traffic flow or congestion?
And also, so there's a counterpart to me that does data analytics on traffic patterns, people traveling patterns, demographics across the area. And they're also utilizing artificial intelligence in some areas for dedicated bus lanes that if somebody accidentally parks in the bus lane, it automatically writes them a ticket.
Oh, wow.
And so it flags them that they were parked where they weren't supposed to, and they're using artificial intelligence in several transit agencies to do that. So they're using various tools and data tools to sort of figure out where we need to be, where we need to focus on, and things like that.
Interesting. And I'm curious too, like on that aspect, because you have, a lot more delivery vehicles on the road now, right? So parking and, that type of thing, especially when you're in a metro area, more congested is a difficult thing. I mean, how does, the government, I guess, public side, like, how are they working with some of these shippers and delivery companies to accommodate more?
So in our agency, we cover 3 states. So we work with Virginia, DC, and Maryland. So we have to sort of coordinate with those 3 entities as well as the federal government, and because we're sort of on the front line, Congress rides our trains, everybody rides our trains, so everybody has an opinion about how it should be run and how it should, where we should go. But we coordinate. We have government liaisons within our agency that works with all those departments to try to to find the best solutions and the best fit that fits everybody's needs, because what works in Maryland may not work in Virginia or may not work in DC, so they work with all 3 entities to find the best solutions.
Very interesting. And I think it's very interesting to see how like all of this is evolving, and then like how transit is getting involved as well. And I'm curious, from that perspective too, when we look at the conversations around like autonomous vehicles and things like that, is that something that the transit associate or authority is kind of looking at and seeing, like, is there a place where we do autonomous buses or something like that?
There's actually already I don't think they're public transit agencies yet. That is one that they're looking into, but there are some areas within the United States where there are autonomous vehicles already driving buses. So for example, in our area in the Inner Harbor, it's a touristy area, and they have the bus called the Ollie, made by Local Motors, and it's autonomous, and it runs a circuit in that area and picks people up and delivers them. So it's interesting. The next biggest thing I think you're going to hear in public transit is on demand. They're calling it micro transit, and it's going to be on demand, sort of Uber, but for public transportation.
Oh, interesting.
So there'll be smaller vehicles, but you call just like you do an Uber, and somebody will pick you up, and it's a third or fourth the price of Uber.
Yeah, because it's public, right? Very interesting. I haven't heard that, so that's really interesting, and I'm interested to see how that works and how that turns out. We talked about that. So I gave a presentation yesterday, and we talked about that in Wilson, North Carolina, and I've seen this in some of the other areas as well. They're already doing this where they have a small fleet of vehicles, and you call, and it's like $2.50 per ride. That's amazing.
So it's like a third the price of calling an Uber. So you can't beat it.
Bring that on. More of that, please. Yes. Definitely. So I'm curious, you're involved in the supply chain space, and then you're here obviously looking for some systems, as you mentioned. Aside from, internal use with the transit authority, what do you think is like most exciting here, or the most exciting technology you're seeing in the supply chain space?
AI is definitely the one that everybody goes to, but I think there's so many different uses. Like for us, the coupling of AI with autonomous vehicles. That is going to be amazing. I've seen some of the autonomous forklifts and shelving. That's amazing. I think that is the kind of stuff that's going to change a lot of the way we do business, at least in the transit world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it definitely makes a lot of change, and it'll be interesting to see how that continues to evolve. So, I mean, for you on the warehousing logistics side, I mean, do you have your own warehouses? Do you contract out? Yeah.
Yeah, we actually manage 25 warehouses, 2 main distribution
Oh, wow.
points, and then 23 smaller locations.
Mm-hmm.
And right now we don't have automation. So that's one of the things we're exploring, because just like everybody else, we have a workforce shortage.
Yeah.
So we're trying to figure out how we're going to make that up. And we're looking at, drones to do cycle counting and things like that. And, autonomous forklifts and things of that nature.
Very interesting. And I'm guessing that, I mean, how does, I guess, from the public sector perspective, I mean, because you have, I'm sure the workers are government employees, right, in the warehouse. So, I mean, is there...
And then, we're heavily unionized.
Yeah.
And it all falls under... We're considered quasi-government, so we are like a government. We operate like a government, but we're not considered a government. So it's a little bit different, sort of hybrid aspect that we have to deal with.
So, I mean, in that sense, I mean, is there... if you look at like autonomous robots or going that route, I mean, is there issues from like union side?
Oh, absolutely,
absolutely.
absolutely.
I mean, how do you deal with that?
Because the union wants more workers on.
More workers.
But there's no when there's nobody applying, what do you do? And so that's one of the things they're working with the union now is what are we going to do moving into the new era? How are we going to have autonomous vehicles? How are we going to augment the workforce and things of that nature? So they're ongoing conversations. It's not again, it's not something for us. It's going to happen today. We're probably talking 5-10 years down the road once we work out the kinks and get everything going.
Right.
But yeah, it's coming.
Very interesting stuff, and very interesting to talk to you from this different kind of perspective. I think, and really interesting to learn about this. I mean, are you supply chain department? I guess sounds like it's kind of new. So I mean, are you guys hiring?
Yeah, absolutely, all the time. We have a warranty department we're standing up. We're always looking for storeroom clerks and storeroom personnel. We're very understaffed, so we're always looking for storeroom personnel. We have a full contracts team. We have a full risk team. We have a cybersecurity team. So transit world is actually, it's sort of underrated as a career because it's like a sandbox. You can go play and try and experiment with any aspect you want to try. And try different things and see how they play out. So in that aspect, we have fun. We love it. It's great. But definitely, if you're looking for a long-term career, public transportation is a great industry.
Really, very interesting. We'll definitely get some information up about that on LinkedIn too, so people can find it. So, Gerald, very interesting stuff. Thank you so much for coming by and chatting with me here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Pleasure to meet you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.